Hello and welcome to Killer Queens, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Torella.
And I'm your better, prettier, younger host, Tori. We're sisters who are obsessed with true crime.
And love gal palin with you about cases. You can expect the occasional curse word,
lots of Friends quotes, and all the 90s nostalgia.
To get in on the conversation, check us out at killerqueenspodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Killer Queens Podcast, and we're on YouTube at Killer Queens, a true crime podcast.
Okay, y'all, grab your Capri Suns or your Surge, and let's talk about some true crime.
Hey.
Hi.
Did it again. I don't like when I do that, but
somehow you always do it.
Yeah, my brain says, don't you do it. And my mouth says, hey. So that's where I am with living.
With that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. So I wonder, has anybody ever heard of this person before?
Yeah.
Or is anybody familiar with the case?
We were just talking about that. You can't find a whole hell of a lot on it.
Mm-mm. No,
so
you
this is one of those obscure, as far as probably not as many people know about it, cases.
Sure. But I mean, we do. Well, wait, do we have some business to do? Do you want to do trigger warnings first? What are we doing here?
Okay. Let's do the description.
Yes.
Trigger warnings, and then we'll do our business.
Okay.
Like, it sounds like we're taking a dog out.
And do our business.
We're going to do our business.
Yes.
You
We're
going
to make on the floor. Yuck. Okay. In the 1980s, two small towns in California were shocked when two 12-year-old boys were brutally murdered. No physical evidence had been left at the scene of the crime, and nobody knew who would want to hurt these two boys. With the help of witnesses and a sketch artist, investigators were able to connect their deaths to the disappearance of a 15-year-old boy. The suspect in question was Jon Dunkle. Despite the ease of connecting the three crimes and identifying Dunkle as a likely suspect in all three cases, Dunkle was unlike any other criminal the investigators had ever dealt with before. It would be years before detectives were able to finally arrest 26-year-old Dunkle, who had been referred to as the Peninsula Serial Killer.
There it is.
I was going so good, and then at the very end.
Yeah. But that's a tough word.
Well, Peninsula Serial
Killer.
That was a little wordy, but that's what he was called.
Yeah.
And the trigger warnings are child murder, mutilated bodies, drug use, and alcohol use.
Yes. So now is your time to decide if this is something that you want to proceed with.
Sure.
And we also do just want to let you know, if you want more episodes, like lots and lots and lots of more episodes, you should check out our Patreon.
Yeah.
We do, guys, 4 episodes a week. I mean, holy moly.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything is ad-free. And I mean, if you need more content, that's the place to be.
It's totally the place to be. And tonight is actually our very last Spotify Green Room.
That is so crazy. The time has come.
So if you guys want to check it out, we are doing Lorena Bobbitt tonight. So an infamous 90s case. If you want to come gal pal with us live about it. Did I say about it?
You already said about it, I think.
Dang. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't say about it. And that sentence is really weird now. Just kidding. So now I said about it twice. If you want to come and gal pal with us about it, then you need to join us. It's search True Crime Rewind on Spotify Green Room or on Spotify. You can listen to old episodes. You can come hang with us for this episode. We've got a chat that is lit.
Yeah. And that's 8 p.m. Central Time.
Yeah. We'll see you there.
Yay.
It's our going away party.
Exactly. All right, let's do it.
Oh, and before we get started,
yes,
thank you to Madison for writing up the script.
Yay, thank you.
Yay. Okay, so we're going to talk about John Davies first. John Davies was 15 years old when his mother, Joan, dropped him off at the San Mateo Public Library on Saturday, November 7th, 1981. I got out of breath. I don't think there's any getting around that.
Oof.
That was an embarrassment, wasn't it? I'm sitting still. It was just after 11 a.m. in San Mateo, California, and Joan was in a hurry this morning. She was a program director for a high school and was heading to monitor a swim meet. Just 4 years earlier, the Davies family, including Joan, her husband Jim, John, and his 2 older brothers, Jimmy and Mark. Where did Mark come from?
I don't know. Joan, John, Jim, Jimmy, Mark.
Wow. Moved from Chicago to Belmont, California. Jim had quit his job in the corporate world and was opening his own 1-hour photo business. Oh, that's memories.
Obsolete.
My gosh. And 1-hour photo was a big damn deal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Because then you didn't have to wait a week to get your pictures back.
Right. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. But he was also renovating Victorian homes. The oldest Davies child, Jimmy, was starting to make a name for himself in the Navy. Mark, who was about 2 years older than John, attended Sarah High School with his brother. John had a tough time in school. He was bullied. He was called names. He had a pretty hard time fitting in. He started following Mark around and trying to find his place. He became friends with other students who played Dungeons and Dragons and experimented with smoking pot, cigarettes, and drinking alcohol. On weekends, Mark would often bring his little brother with him to neighborhood parties so that he could hang out with older kids. John, who had been a pretty good student before transferring to Sarah High School a few months earlier, let his grades fall. I mean, he's really focused on this social life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at the expense of all else, right?
Yes.
Like,
well, and I mean, he had a little bit of a hard time, you know?
Yeah.
So I can understand him. I don't think that he should have let his grades fall. I mean, that's important, but I can understand wanting to find where you fit in.
Yeah, moving at that age is so hard.
How would you know? You read about it in a book.
Yeah, I assume moving at that age is so hard.
Yeah, we never ever moved.
I know. I'm super, it keeps me up at night thinking about moving Ben for first grade from where he's at kindergarten.
Well, and I was going to say, I mean, we did move when I was in the 7th grade, you were in the 9th grade. We did move schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we lived in the same house, but we just moved schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then right when we started to make friends, we were moved back, but we're not bitter. But yeah, I mean, that's just gotta be really tough. I completely get it.
Definitely.
Joan told her son how disappointed she was that he was neglecting his schoolwork, and John had promised to do better. That day, John was planning on working on 2 history papers, then heading to visit his best friend, Larry. What a 80s kid name.
Larry. I know.
Because everybody we know that's named Larry is older, in their 50s now. That's funny. John told his mother that he liked living in California despite having some trouble at school. He liked his new friends, and he loved helping his dad with house restorations. Though the youngest Davies boys partied a little too much, the Davies family seemed to have settled in well to their new home. Around 5:30 p.m. that night, Jim came home to find John and Mark in the kitchen before leaving to meet his wife at a dinner party. Mark and 2 of his friends went up to his room to hang out. The boys usually polished off a few 6-packs of beer, but Mark had taken John to a big party last night and was still recovering. I mean, we did not have the balls to do this kind of stuff at home.
No.
We didn't have the balls to do this kind of stuff at all until we were over 18. But
I know. I'm just shocked that this was high school and it was just kind of common and normal and everybody knew about it.
Yeah. I'm we're not allowed to do that.
I know.
Yeah. So John, like he often did, tried coming into Mark's room to hang out, but Mark was not having it this night. He told him to leave, and after a small tussle, John ran upstairs to his own room crying. Later that evening, Mark went into his brother's room and saw that he'd cleaned it up, and he told him that the room looked great, and John was like, "I'm sorry, is somebody speaking? I don't hear anybody.
Not listening."
Nope. Around 11 p.m., Mark fell asleep, so John walked his friends home. Afterwards, he came back to his house and watched a movie with Carlos. At 12:30 a.m., the 2 boys went to bed. Carlos remembered seeing John shut his bedroom door behind him and heard his tape deck start playing. And around 1:30 a.m., Joan and Jim arrived home. My God.
It's hard. There's so
many J's.
So many J's, and they're kind of close sounding.
Yeah. John and Joan, that's close.
Yeah.
The next morning, Joan awoke to find the front door open. She figured that Mark had snuck out and then snuck back in and forgot to shut the door and lock it. That's just again, it's just so wild to me. She's like, they snuck out again, whatever.
Right. I wonder, was she mad about it? Or was she typical John or Mark or whoever? Yeah.
Didn't shut the door back.
Yeah.
So she went to wake the boys up for church at 9 a.m., but she couldn't find Jon anywhere. She noticed that though her 15-year-old was gone, his new jacket, shoes, and his money were still in his room. And Jon would never even go past the driveway without these shoes. Joan was pretty concerned, but Jim and Mark didn't think it was that big of a deal. Mark said he'd gone to bed early. He didn't know anything about Jon sneaking out, but he assumed his brother was just probably trying to ditch church, even though Joan had found where Jon had laid out his church clothes for that morning. But even still, he was just like, he probably decided he didn't want to go, right? Jim said they'd probably find Jon at home after church nursing a hangover.
Again, that's just...
Again.
Okay. Yeah. Probably. I mean...
He's probably just going to be
surprised by that. Yeah.
Yeah. The family left for the morning service at Belmont Baptist, and when they returned, Jon still wasn't home. So Jim called the police in hopes of starting an investigation while the rest of the family tried to think of places Jon might have been. They called neighbors, every friend of Jon's that they could think of, but nobody had seen him. Mark, unbeknownst to his parents, went into Jon's room and checked a secret hiding spot that he and Jon had for drugs. This terrifies me.
I know. You don't need to be reading this stuff.
I know. I'm like, everything that my children have in their room, I'm going to pull apart to see if there's drugs in them. Because they hid tabs of LSD in a decorative wine bottle. There was a small film canister inside, and so they would keep their LSD in there. But Mark knew that there should have been LSD in it, but when he opened it, all of it was gone. And now he's super, super worried because Jon had taken LSD for the first time the week before that. And when he did, he couldn't recognize his surroundings. He didn't recognize his brother. So Mark was like, okay, Jon was super mad at me last night. He took all this LSD and he left, and maybe he doesn't know where he is, or maybe something happened.
Absolutely.
The following day, a detective from Belmont PD arrived at the Davies home. It turned out that no one had even taken a report on Jon's disappearance when Jim called the day before that.
Perfect. We love to hear that. Thank you so much, police.
I'm so glad I called.
Yeah, thanks for wasting everyone's time.
And of course, what are they going to do? They're like, man, he's a runaway, whatever. And the Davies were like, he would not have run away. Before the detective left, too, Mark pulled him aside and told him about the missing LSD. And he was really concerned that Jon had had a bad trip. He was lost somewhere. He was hurt somewhere. The detective took down all the information. He took it back to the station, where he learned later in the week that the Davies had already been circulating missing posters with Jon's information. And they have to. I mean,
they have to do all the work.
Y'all aren't doing anything.
Yep.
People started reporting sightings of Jon in nearby cities. The police never confirmed. And not that they didn't confirm them because they did the legwork. They just didn't even try to confirm any of the sightings. Based on these reports, they just said, well, somebody called and said he was seen in another city, so he's fine.
Right. It's
and
like
also,
the
he's taken drugs before. Yes. Yeah, the Millbrook twins. Well, somebody said so fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just decided that because he'd taken drugs before, because he had he was a rebellious teenager, because people said they saw him in other places, he was a runaway and there's no investigation needed. Joan and Jim told the detective they thought Jon could have left that evening with a friend of the family, 21-year-old Jon Dunkle.
Oh, this is so frustrating.
This is so frustrating. They said that they had no doubt that if Dunkle asked, Jon would have left in the middle of the night with him. He would have gone anywhere. Both he and Mark partied often with Dunkle, and he was very close to Joan and Jim. Despite the police saying that they cleared Dunkle, both Joan and Jim continued to tell people, when our son disappeared from our lives, so did Jon Dunkle.
Yep.
And that is a red flag. Who do you know that maybe quit their job out of nowhere, who sold a vehicle out of nowhere, who up and moved out of nowhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and
what are the things you look for?
Okay, well, he ran away. Oh, well, who cares?
Yeah.
So now we have to talk about Lance Turner. 12-year-old Lance Turner had been dropped off at the Ralston Intermediate School soccer fields at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, October 2nd, 1984. Lance carpooled with 3 of his friends, Ian, Thomas, and Mark. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking Thomas, Ian, Nicholas. Remember him? He was in A Kid in King Arthur's Court. No?
No, why am I forgetting who this is?
He was also in American Pie, but okay.
Was he oh, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yes, okay.
Oh, I loved him, yes.
Right. Yes, we loved him. He was in like all the Bop magazines.
I was like, I feel like you're talking about somebody that I was in love with, but I can't think of who. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time. Loved him.
Yep. Still do, honestly. So Ian, Thomas, and Mark were all on the same team as Lance, and Ian's father, Tim, dropped the boys off. Their soccer practice didn't start until 5 p.m., but Tim coached a younger team that had an earlier practice. So the 4 boys had absolutely no problem filling that empty hour. They had grown up with each other in Belmont and loved playing sports and Dungeons and Dragons, and Lance was considered an especially handsome 7th grader. He had blonde hair, he had blue eyes, and Lance was popular, even with the 8th grade girls.
Wow.
It's just, I've never known what that would have been like. But his older sister, Tracy, would tell her friends that despite Lance only being 12, he was a, quote, stud, and girls called the house for him often.
Wow. I'm thinking of somebody that was in my grade that would have been this person.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We all were like, took turns trying to call him, and then we chickened out.
Well,
one time he called me. And I was like, oh my God. But when I called him back, he was asking for instructions on the homework we had that night.
Well, I remember there was one kid in my grade too. And one of the 8th graders, because when we were in the 6th grade, he dated a girl that was in the 8th grade.
Wow.
That you know. But anyway, so his parents, Margot and Quincy, thought of Lance as a happy and confident child who was growing into a thoughtful and smart teenager. And on the day of their practice, Tim left the boys on the fields while he went to coach his team. The Ralston campus backed up to the Water Dog Lake recreation area. I hate Water Dog Lake. I hate it.
Water Dog.
I don't like it.
It seems like
sounds like the name of a beer or something.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. I think it's stupid. But anyway, so there were many trails and picnic areas as well as the lake itself, and teenagers hung out in the woods and on trails often, many of them using the secluded area to drink, to smoke, or to hook up. A lot of drinking and smoking in high school.
Hooking up.
It's just, wow.
For very young people, yeah.
I know.
I think we were
just too goody two shoes to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, because I'm like, what is with all these children drinking and smoking? This is crazy, but it's like normal. Okay. It was a large area, but the boys were familiar with it. So Lance told his friends that he was bored and he suggested that they go down to the rope swing near the lake. But his friends said that they didn't want to go, that it was a little bit cooler out that day. And Mark said that it would be cold by the water. Lance told them that he would just go alone. His friends saw him run down towards the wooded area until he passed the quote unquote smoking tree and into the woods. At 4:50 p.m., the coach for Belmont Oaks Soccer League, Ray Williamson, gathered the boys between ages 10 and 16, and they started practice. Lance's friends grabbed their soccer bags and noticed that the number 10 bag was left on the bench. Unsure of who the number 10 was, they grabbed the bag and hurried over to their practice. At 6 p.m., Thomas's father, Bill, pulled up at the practice field, and Thomas, Ian, and Mark ran to the car to be driven home. Bill asked where Lance was. He was part of their carpool, and he normally gave him a ride home. And the boys said they didn't know where he was, but Bill asked them to go look for Lance. The 3 boys ran down the trail to the rope swing and back, but they didn't see him. When they got back to Bill, they told him they couldn't find him. Bill asked Coach if Lance had been at practice, and the coach said he hadn't seen him either. Both Coach and Bill agreed that it was super strange for Lance to miss practice and his mom not call and let someone know.
I mean, he's 12.
Yeah. I mean, and we've talked about this before, but like he doesn't get the opportunity to.
Yeah, yes. That is so frustrating to me because even with John Davies, he's 15 and they're like, well, he's a runaway. He is not allowed to run away. So you need to look for him.
Yeah.
He's not allowed to do that.
Right. Like, let's just say that he did. He didn't. But let's just say that he did.
Yeah. You still got to look for him because he's not supposed to fucking do that.
Exactly.
Yep. Like, it's not safe for a 15-year-old to be living on the street, even if that's their choice. Like, it's not safe.
Not at all. So Coach and another adult went down the trail to the rope swing, but they couldn't find him either. And it started to get dark out and the adults were worried. Margot Turner was contacted and told that her son was missing. Around 7:15 p.m. that evening, a Belmont police officer arrived at the Turner home. Margot was scared that Lance had fallen from the rope swing and was possibly hurt somewhere. Her husband, Quincy, was down at the field searching for his son. While the officer headed to the fields to help search, Coach had gathered some fathers and older players to search the wooded area. He had divided the area into a grid and split the volunteers into search crews. Lance's friend, Thomas, His father, Bill, and Quincy went down the trail that Thomas said Lance took to the rope swing. They used their flashlights to light up the trail and look off to the sides, and about 25 feet off of the path, Bill's flashlight caught something. He thought it was a tennis shoe, but as he got closer, he recognized that there were legs and feet. He kneeled down closer and shined his light through a tunnel of brush, and he saw Lance laying on his back and touched his leg. And when he did that, Bill knew that he was dead. He heard Quincy asking him what he was doing, and Bill quickly stood up and told Quincy that his son was dead. So sad. 7th grade.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're not finished with victim stories. So now we're going to talk about 12-year-old Sean Dannell. Is that how you feel like it's pronounced?
I don't know.
Okay.
Dannell? I don't know.
Yeah. So we're not totally sure, but I'm going to go with Dannell.
Okay.
On July 2nd, 1985, Sean had set out on his bicycle to ride across the old Fair Oaks footbridge to Rancho Cordova.
And Sean is 12 at this point.
Yes. The route would take him about 2 miles down a bike trail and through a residential area to where some of Sean's friends lived. His mother, Ellen, had given him permission to go visit his friends as long as he was back before dark, and she felt really confident he would be back before dark because he was scared of the dark. So she was like, he's going to get back well before that, right? He's not going to chance it. Sean hadn't been in Fair Oaks for very long. His parents were divorced, and he used to live with his mother and her boyfriend, Kip, in Rancho Cordova. About 2 years earlier, Sean had left to go live with his father, Guy, and his wife, Debbie, in the foothills of Sierra Nevada Mountains, the Sierra Nevada Mountains. Guy, Debbie, and their new baby were taking a vacation to Tahoe and wanted Sean to join, but he wanted to go visit his mom since he didn't get to see her very often. Sean was a very active kid. He loved playing soccer, baseball, basketball, and could often be found swimming or on his bike. He loved to be adventurous and had even just broken his arm after falling from a rope swing at camp. Active kid.
Yeah, very.
He had a cast on his left arm that prevented him from pitching in his Little League All-Star game. And he was the top pitcher for his team. That bummed him out. Yeah. At about 7:30 p.m., Sean got back on his bike and headed home. At 8:30 p.m., Ellen starts to get worried. Sean still wasn't home, and it was starting to get dark. So she asked a neighbor for help and began walking towards the trail that her son would have taken. She saw a crowd of people near a brush fire and figured Sean must have just gotten sidetracked watching the fire, which is something a kid would do. I don't know. Honestly, yeah. I probably would do it.
I would do it too. Fire is mesmerizing.
It really is. It's just she saw that and was like, oh, thank God. This is why he's held up,
Exactly, yeah.
But she goes over to see if he's in the crowd. He's not there. So she keeps looking around, but she can't find him. Around 10 p.m., Ellen made sure that Kip was by the phone in case Sean called. She went to walk a bike trail, but returned without her son. Around midnight, Kip got on a bike and took a flashlight to the trail to look for Sean while Ellen called the police. 2 hours later, an officer came by the residence and said, hey, remember how we can't do anything because he hasn't been missing for 24 hours? So we're just definitely not going to do anything.
We wanted to come by and tell you that we can't help you at all, but thank you so much for calling.
Yeah. We called to say we can't talk right now. So the police also discovered that the year before that, they had arrested both Ellen and Kip for possession of drug paraphernalia. Sean wasn't with them when it happened, but police were like, oh God, this makes perfect sense. He came to visit his mom because he loves her and misses her. But because last year they got arrested for drug paraphernalia, that was his reason. And now he ran away. So we don't even need to look for him because he's 12 and he's fine, right? He's got a bike.
How would they make that kind of connection that is so ridiculously stupid?
Again, it doesn't matter what your reason is for running away. Not supposed to do it. So if a child is running away, you need to find them and you need to make sure they're safe. And you also need to make sure that their home is safe to come back to. But either way, there's something going on. Either they're running away and they're not supposed to and they need to come back home because that's where they're safe, or they're running away because home isn't safe and you need to figure that out.
Right. And let's be clear too, and I'm not saying that because, I think it's very important to not break the law. I think that is important. But we fast forward 30 years, 20, 40 years, And if it was, let's say, for smoking pot, having a bong, whatever, you fast forward 40 years, it's now legal. So, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Ellen, Kip, and friends spent the next several days getting flyers made and showing them around the trails and nearby popular areas. The media hadn't given his disappearance any attention yet because of the recent discoveries of multiple murder victims of Charles Ng and Leonard Lake.
Fuck those guys.
Oh my gosh, which we did cover in a 2-part. I don't remember the episode numbers, but if you want that whole story and you want to throw some more shit out the window, go check it out.
Yep.
Finally, on July 4th, Sean's disappearance was covered on the news. A friend of Sean's father saw the newscast and called Ellen to find out how to get in touch with him. It's very interesting that Ellen didn't bother to call him.
Yeah.
Like, hey, our son is missing. Like, I get that we're not married anymore, but like...
Well, right. I mean, but this is significant. This is days later. This is not like, oh, I've lost track of him at the grocery store. There's no reason to call for that.
Yeah, he was supposed to be home at 8, but it's 9. He's not home yet. Like, okay, fine. But yeah, This is days later. You've already involved the police. You're making flyers looking for him.
Yeah.
But I don't know. He finally finds out about it, and Guy is like, Sean is smart. He is resourceful.
He's street smart. He can hang on his own.
Yeah, I'm not that worried about him. He considered Ellen to be a bit of a mess, which I'm going to agree with here. And Guy's wife thought it might be possible that Sean wanted to leave the environment. So, I mean, I don't know. The police really don't have enough information to go on for that. Obviously, Guy and his wife are going to have a little more context to everything, but still, Guy was like, no, Sean's not going to run away. Like, I don't care who says he would. I don't care what's gone on. He's not going to run away. But the police, of course, didn't believe him.
Right.
The searches for Sean continued throughout the trails and area where he'd last traveled. On July 8th, 6 days after Sean went missing, 2 bikers were riding on the trail around 7:45 p.m. One of the men noticed a blue bicycle about 40 feet off the trail, partially covered by brush.
No.
I know. He ventured down into the brush and saw that it was a boy's bike. Through the low-hanging trees, the man looked further and saw the outline of a person about 20 feet away. He could see 2 bare legs, and as he got closer, he smelled a terrible odor and knew what he'd just found. So the men called the police, who quickly declared the area a crime scene. When investigators crawled through the bushes and approached the body, they initially believed it to be a young black male due to the coloring, and they thought he was asleep until they touched him and realized that this is absolutely a deceased person. The body had a cast on the left arm, but initially, they're thinking that we found a young black male, so they're not connecting it to the disappearance of Sean. They asked for a coroner to be called to the scene to examine the body and get a little more information, to be sure that what they were thinking was correct. But the coroner determined that the body could be that of a white male that had suffered discoloration due to the elements. And it did end up being the body of Sean Dannell.
It's so sad. The Davies family felt that police had let the disappearance of their son, John, fall out of focus, which they absolutely did because they didn't really care that much to begin with. But Jim and Joan did everything they could to bring attention to their son and keep his disappearance from being forgotten. They still couldn't understand how police had cleared Jon Dunkle. At one time, Dunkle had been a part of their family. One day at church, 4 years earlier, the oldest Davies son, Jimmy, introduced his parents to a classmate of his, which was Jon Dunkle. Joan thought that John seemed shy but sweet and perhaps needed a little bit of parental care and love.
Is he taking his prenatal?
I hope so.
And folic acid is important for everybody, right?
Well, I mean, I would think, I don't know. It's good for your skin and your hair and your nails.
Sure it is. Sure it is. Mm-hmm.
She immediately invited him over for Sunday dinner at the Davies home. And after this dinner, Dunkle's visits became more frequent. He told the Davies stories of his childhood, explaining that his problems with learning started when his brother pushed him out of a window as a toddler. He told them that he was a police informant. He often talked about abuse and problems in his family, and Joan and Jim didn't challenge Dunkle's crazy stories. They seemed harmless, but They even let him sleep over when he came to the house one night with Jimmy, and they were both very, very intoxicated. And he told them that his dad would beat him if he saw him like that.
Hmm.
Dunkle became part of the family. He even called Jim and Joan mom and dad. And he came into the house, didn't even bother to knock. He was just walking right in. He had pretty severe dyslexia and had a difficult time writing and reading. And Dunkle's school problems weren't just with schoolwork. He also had a really rough social life. Most people considered him to be a really odd guy. He was bullied at school. He was extremely socially awkward. Jimmy said that he befriended him out of pity and he wanted to get him out of the house and teach him how to be a teenager. So he took him to parties where Dunkle was a lightweight with alcohol. He would get extremely drunk and very giggly. And unfortunately, that made people just bully him even more. After Jimmy graduated and moved out, Dunkle, who was then 20 years old, became friends with Mark and John. And the boys put up with Dunkle because he could buy them alcohol. With Dunkle's heavy alcohol use and affinity for driving drunk, it was not long before he got a DUI. And Mark was actually in the passenger seat when he got it. John absolutely forbid her boys from riding anywhere with Dunkle. So they would sit in his new white Honda Civic in the driveway and they would listen to the sound system. Dunkle's extravagant stories continued. He got a job working airport security, and he said that he was supposed to be watching for a serial killer that was flying in.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. He then said that he had a Christian awakening while he was at work and he left the job. In May of 1981, Dunkle left for a Youth for Christ training camp in Oregon. And then 4 months later, he unexpectedly showed back up to the Davies home and told them that he'd quit because they made him work too hard. That doesn't sound like an extravagant story. It does sound real, but the working too hard thing and him not wanting to do that. But
yeah.
So Mark continued to party with Dunkle occasionally, but he really just got tired of his immaturity and weird affect. And Dunkle started hanging out with John because he was kind of the only one that would hang out with him. But John was only 15 and John felt important and cool to hang out with a 22-year-old.
Of course.
Yeah. And it wasn't long after Dunkle and John began hanging out by themselves that John disappeared. The Belmont police spoke to Dunkle, who had just started a new job at Toys R Us.
Dude.
First the 1 hour photo and now it's Toys R Us. It's like,
miss it every day. I was so excited once I had kids. I was like, so we can go to Toys R Us again. But then they shut it down.
Don't even get me started on KB Toys. Right? I know. And, Target's fine, but it's like, it's not even a whole store dedicated to toys.
No. And it's just not the same.
It's not the same. No. And while we're at it, I want to add the Sears Christmas time catalog back to the list of things that I want to bring back.
The best. I mean, Amazon came out with theirs, but
it's not the same.
And also try finding what Amazon puts in the catalog on the actual website. You can search the exact thing and it's not there. What is happening, Amazon?
Yeah, I
know they're listening.
Sure. Yeah, I know they are too. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you finally got that off your chest and you put it right into Amazon's little ears. So
exactly.
Yes.
Amazon, I didn't want to have to do that, but you forced my hand.
Dunkle started this new job at Toys R Us, right? Love it. He's hanging out with Jeffrey every day. He said that he'd last been to the Davies home on the 4th or the 5th to take Mark out, and he started the new job on the 9th. And this was 2 days after John was last seen. He told police he had no clue where John might be, but he wanted to help in any way that he could.
Sure.
So, though they couldn't get Dunkle out of their head, Jim and Joan tried to accept that the police had appropriately cleared him of being involved in their son's disappearance.
And that's your first mistake, isn't it? Assuming that these police actually did their job.
Absolutely. Yes.
I mean, and no fault of the parents, of course, but you're supposed to be able to accept that the police appropriately cleared somebody.
Yeah.
The murder of Lance Turner didn't seem to be connected to any other attacks in the area. Luckily, there'd been quite a few people in the area on the trail that had seen Lance and may have seen his killer. Belmont police set about accounting for all the people who'd been seen around the Tori's favorite Water Dog Lake
I think
area.
That's stupid. I'm sorry.
This might be stupid, but it's a water dog.
Like a lab?
Yeah, there's lots of dogs that like water, but Water Dog Lake.
I don't know.
It's just, yeah. But they wanted to start trying to find the people who may have been around the lake at the time.
Who might have seen Lance last. Yeah.
Yeah. Slowly, these unidentified people came forward. Now, again, this is 3 years later. So, cool idea, police.
Yeah.
Like, do that in the very beginning.
Yeah, because what are the odds of people actually remembering super detailed information about something, like a random day to them 3 years ago?
Exactly, because by that point, you're like, you'll start to, like, your memories will start to merge, and you'll be like, oh, the day we went to the lake, we also went to Pizza Hut or whatever. Like,
and in reality,
maybe
that was
you went
two
to
separate
Pizza
days.
Hut the week before. Yeah, exactly. Like, so frustrating. The only person who hadn't been identified had been seen by 2 groups of people. The first was 2 young boys. They'd gone to the smoking tree, and one of the boys began to urinate on the tree, because why not?
Well, that's boys too.
Yeah, suddenly, someone yelled at them to get lost. They saw a guy sitting on a tree branch. He had light, greasy, shoulder-length hair and braces, and the 2 boys ran off. Like, this is an old man. He's like, get out of here! Sounds like an old man.
Get lost.
Yeah,
Scram.
Scram! Yes. Oh my gosh. A few minutes later, 4 8th grade girls skipping volleyball practice went down to the smoking tree to dig out a pack of hidden cigarettes and a matchbook. These are gutsy kids.
Yes, they are.
Like, oh my gosh. So the girls looked up. They see this guy sitting on a tree branch. They estimated that he was between 16 and 19 years old. He offered them some sips from his beer can, and they shared a cigarette with him. None of them could remember his name, but they believed it was John or Don or something similar. And of course not, because you asked so long. Like, if you'd asked them the next day,
they would have a clearer memory. But I'm shocked that they even got John or Don.
I know. Well, and like, they also could have remembered so much more detail about his appearance. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Jeez. But they decided to leave the tree because this guy is starting to creep them out significantly. They remembered seeing Lance run by them around 4:15 p.m. The girls agreed to sit with a sketch artist who produced a drawing that they all felt looked similar to the guy but wasn't exactly right. Not a great start, okay? Like, looks kind of close, but not really. Okay?
Yeah, something's off here with this.
And they're like, well, we're going to plaster this everywhere and see who looks like this guy that's probably not actually the right look. But
right.
Okay. Like, what the fuck? Police decided to hypnotize one of the girls and have her describe the guy for a different sketch artist. Once the sketch was finished and shown to the other girls, they agreed completely that the new sketch looked exactly like the guy.
So they got it right.
Once they were hypnotized. Other boys and girls who'd been near the smoking tree that day agreed. So, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about hypnotism, honestly.
I don't buy it, but I've never been hypnotized, so I don't know if that would change my mind.
I haven't either. Like, I was listening to a case where a guy was hypnotized and then ended up, like, confessing or whatever to his daughter's murder. And he didn't do it. And he died in prison. He never got out. Yeah.
I don't think that you should be able to use hypnosis to get a confession. You know, I don't think it should hold up in court.
No, of course not. And one of the things, though, that, like, because they had the audio of it, it was a Dateline I listened to. They had the audio of it, and he sounds like he's sleep talking almost.
Right. Like dreaming.
How does it work?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, how do they really get you into that state? That's
I have
really crazy to me. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know.
The extent of my knowledge on it would be what I've seen on Office Space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Apparently works.
Yeah.
Per Office Space. Meanwhile, the medical examiner had determined that Lance's cause of death was exsanguination.
Which means that all of the blood from his body was drained.
Yes. He had several wounds across his body from a sharp object, as well as abrasions to his forehead. A rock had been found nearby with Lance's blood on it. So the medical examiner believed that the attacker had struck Lance with a rock to disable him before attacking him with the knife. There was significant evidence that Lance had fought back against his attacker. Police returned to the nearby high school to continue their search for Johns or Dons in their records. The officer laid the new composite sketch on a nearby desk and began looking through records. The secretary saw the sketch and was shocked. She told the officer it looked very similar to a student clerk that she supervised for several years. He had learning disabilities and was very sweet. She even trusted him to house sit for her and her friends. She said he had no social skills. He was constantly making up wild stories to impress classmates. The officer showed the sketch to several other staff members in the office, and everyone agreed that the sketch was a clear match for the former student clerk, Jon Dunkle. When the officer brought this information back to the station, another officer mentioned that he knew the name, that he'd been trying to get in touch with him for weeks in attempts to interview him for the investigation of the John Davies case. Lance and John were very different, and their stories didn't seem to have any common factors except for Jon Dunkle.
With the multiple identifications of the sketch of the unknown man, police began to dive further into Dunkle. Why they didn't maybe they couldn't. I don't know. Joan and Jim.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So he had several arrests for DUIs and other alcohol-related crimes, including a drunk driving arrest where he'd hit a man on a moped. He drugged said moped and the man about 30 feet before speeding off.
I mean,
top-notch guy.
Yeah.
He attempted to get a friend to cover for him, but the moped driver got his license plate and he was arrested.
Yeah, bad plan, dude.
Yeah. And also, don't be friends with him because he'll fucking, he did it.
Exactly.
So his license was revoked, but he remained on probation. And police were very interested in speaking with him about Lance's murder, but Dunkle continued to string them along. When they'd set up an appointment, he would set up a date. And he was, okay, yeah, let's totally do this. Let's do a date and a time. Then he would cancel last minute. And in their continued investigation into Dunkle's life, they found that 3 days after Lance's murder, he moved from his parents' home in Belmont to live with his sister in Sacramento. Finally, after having been blown off multiple times by Dunkle, investigators decided to go to him. So they drive to Dunkle's house his sister's house in Sacramento to meet with him. He denied ever having gone out drinking with Mark Davies. He said that John never sat in his car to listen to music. He blamed the loss of his license on friends, saying that they got him drunk and they caused him to get multiple DUIs. He denied ever having been close to the Davies family and said that he had no idea where John might be, but oh man, he would just, anything he could do to help, he would love to do that.
Well, of course. I mean, he's helpful.
That's all he wants to do is just help.
He's like a little engine. He's very useful.
Oh, sure. And he thinks he can.
Yeah.
Yep. So they slipped in a few questions about Lance toward the end of their visit, and Dunkle said that he had been out job hunting the day of Lance's murder. He said that he went out around 12:30 p.m., asked or applied for multiple jobs, and got home around 4:30. He said that his mom actually saw him come home, so they asked Dunkle if he would consent to a polygraph test, and he was like, I feel like I'd check with my dad first about that one. But he did agree to letting police take a Polaroid photo of him for their records. So there's unfortunately no physical evidence to tie Dunkle to Lance's murder, even though eyewitnesses identified him. All it does is prove that he was at the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
Police spoke with the associates at every store that Dunkle claimed he had applied to on the day of Lance's murder, and also looked through their stacks of applications, and nobody recognized him, and they did not find any of Dunkle's applications that placed him there on that specific day. But don't worry, Dunkle has a reason for this.
Of course.
Yeah. When police were like, hey guy, hey man, hey dude,
scram.
Yeah. Get lost, man. They were like, hey, I feel like you lied to us earlier because you said that you went and applied for all these jobs, but we went and checked because that's what we sometimes do. And we didn't find anything. And he's like, okay, they probably just lost him.
Oh.
Next question.
Yeah. Okay.
He was like, I was definitely there. Obviously they lost them. Every store that I went to, every one of them lost it.
Yeah.
So they told him that he'd been identified at being at Water Dog Lake that day by multiple witnesses, as well as they had a beer can with his fingerprints on it that had been found at the smoking tree. And Dunkle was not worried about this at all. He was like, nope, I've never been to Water Dog Lake. The last time I went was June, and that everyone who saw him there was lying.
Okay, guy.
Come on, guy.
Like, it's not me, okay? It's every single other person I've ever come into contact with and everybody else that was there. And like all these people have the same memory, but they're all mistaken.
Apparently. Yeah.
And my fingerprints are there.
Yep. I don't see how nobody's getting this, but exactly.
I know. Like, he's like, I literally don't know any other languages.
Right. You have to listen. So he also continued to deny that he ever hung out with John Davies and that he only occasionally hung out with Mark. Nothing rattled Dunkle.
But like, it's so obviously lies. Like, Mark and the Davies parents are like, no, he was here all the time. He practically lived here. He called us mom and dad. Like, he's like, man, I didn't really know him that well. Okay.
Yeah, they're lying, clearly. So despite having these social, awkward, all that kind of stuff, Dunkle seemed to enjoy the attention that he was receiving from police. After 5 hours of questioning, the police didn't get anything. He just loved being there and being the center of attention, I guess.
Yeah, at some point, I guess, you realize like he will keep this going as long as humanly possible just for the attention.
Absolutely. So like, oh, just pull the plug. He's not going to give us anything.
Yeah.
So their next step was to meet with Mrs. Dunkle at her home. And through their research, they'd found that she and her husband had a history of domestic abuse. They got divorced at one point and they got remarried shortly thereafter. And Mrs. Dunkle would drop off bagged lunches to her son every day at his last job. She showed them her son's room, which was plain. I mean, there was a small twin bed and there was a Bible on the nightstand. That was it. There were no decorations. You could not tell that a 20-something-year-old man was living there.
It was like it was an extra room that they hadn't used in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, just nothing.
So police showed Mrs. Dunkle the composite sketch from the suspect from the smoking tree. And she was like, that does not look like my little John. That does not look like him at all. Absolutely not. And she was like, no,
and
listen.
All the people who said it did are mistaken.
Exactly. They are liars.
Mm-hmm.
So she also was like, listen, my son is gentle. He would never hurt anybody. And she also told them that, yeah, the day that he was supposed to be at Waterdog Lake, she left work at 3:50 p.m. She gets home and she actually saw John come home at 4:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And police left the home and they're like, why would she lie to save him? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Like, these are just a family full of people that don't care to lie to the police.
Apparently not. So they also believed that when Mrs. Dunkle saw the news of Lance's murder on television, she guessed that it possibly was her son. So she very quickly arranged for him to go live with his sister.
Jeez.
Mr. Dunkle was kind of a shit to police. He was super hostile towards them. He told them that they needed to leave his son alone and quit trying to pin things on him. And he said that his son didn't have a drinking problem, that he did not stay out late at night. He said that the boys he hung out with were always trying to set him up for things he didn't do. And his son did not have a violent temper. And then he told police that his son had always been a good boy.
Wow.
We're just living in denial. Denial is, it's not a river in Egypt. Come on.
I mean, like, your son is a shithead, and like, now we see why.
Yeah.
All you do is make excuses for him. Everything bad that he's ever, like, kids make mistakes, like, whatever, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got...
They're not going to learn if you just...
Yeah, he's got multiple DUIs, and you refuse to believe that he has a drinking problem.
Right.
Like, and everything that's ever happened, somebody else did and let him take the fall for it. It's just not even feasible. So do the right thing and hold your kid accountable.
Yeah, be a parent.
Yeah. So by this point, investigators have hit a wall. No matter how much they interviewed Dunkle, how or who questioned them, what kind of pressure they put on him, he wouldn't budge. He continued to tell them fantastical stories of being in the mafia and how he asked to be fired from past jobs while working for the IRS.
It seems like he treated the police interrogations as story time.
Yeah.
Let me entertain you with a tale of...
I got a good one for you today, guys.
Yeah.
Like,
made this one up on the way in.
Dunkle seemed to always remain calm when in the presence of investigators and continued to enjoy their attention, appearing to even admire some of the officers. And he, remember, he interacts at a much younger age than he actually is. So, that's something to keep in mind as well. Feeling like they had nothing left to lose, they decided to put a young female officer into Dunkle's life as an undercover friend. In January of 1985, Dunkle met Lisa Thomas when she was hired at his job at a Rancho Cordova Carl's Jr. Dunkle was tasked with orienting Lisa to the job, which he took very seriously. Dunkle invited Lisa to a work gathering after her first day at a nearby bar. He polished off several beers and pointed to a poster on the wall that had the sketch of a suspect in Lance's murder. He told Lisa that police thought that was him, that he'd killed a kid. He added that police also suspected him in the disappearance of John Davies. Officers couldn't believe that on Lisa's first day of wearing a wire around Dunkle, he'd brought up both Lance and John. I mean, he just can't stop. Like, Lisa began hanging out with Dunkle on almost a daily basis. They'd go on bike rides, they'd go drinking, and Dunkle told her about how there were always undercover cops following him.
That had to have been so hard for her to do. I mean, I know it's her job, but good grief.
And also, like, it's like, yeah, but I'm undercover. Like, if you're aware of that, then why are you so trusting of me just coming into your life in this moment?
Right.
This doesn't make sense, but whatever. She wanted him to feel connected with her in hopes that he'd share more about what he'd done. She told him that the police had taken away her license too. Dunkle was very excited to hear that.
Yay, we both have drinking problems. Yay!
Yeah, exactly. We both can't get anywhere on our own accord. Oops. At one point, I had a guy ask me on a date who I really wanted to go on a date with. And he was like, great, let's go here. Here's the day, time, whatever. He's like, catch though, you're going to have to come pick me up. And I was like, why? He's like, well, I have a DUI. I can't drive for like however many more months. And I was like,
that really sucks, man. Like, I cannot imagine.
I know. And I almost went on the date. And I'm pretty sure you were like, no. Like, that guy is never going to pick you up. And probably you're going to have to pay for it too. But like, I don't know. I can't imagine how like,
how would you get like, thank God for Uber, I guess, but that's expensive.
Yeah. And like then that wasn't a thing. Like,
yeah.
But no worries, because they went to a picnic in a park area. And Dunkle told Lisa as he wiped off his drink can that he always cleaned his cans now ever since police found his fingerprints on a beer can at Waterdog Lake.
He's just letting it all out.
I know, because he's telling the police, you're mistaken. I haven't been there since June or whatever.
And then he's telling the police that he has been there and that they found his fingerprints.
And now I've got to wipe off every can I touch. And like, what? Okay, but why do you need to wipe them off here? Like, what do you do? What's going to happen?
Right.
Like, you doing something you're not supposed to? Like, I don't know. After more than a month of hanging out, he began to reveal more secrets to Lisa about assaults he'd been responsible for, more drunk driving accidents he'd been in. As their relationship intensified, investigators decided to remove Lisa from Dunkle's life after he broke into a family's house and attempted to assault a child on one of their dates. And Dunkle seemed unfazed that she decided to leave. Not long after this, Dunkle was arraigned for the home break-in and ended up being sentenced to 6 years in prison with the assistance of Lisa's testimony. This is a dangerous person.
A very dangerous person, yes.
Scary.
In September of Why did I just say September?
Like, I don't know.
Okay. In September of 1986, 26-year-old Dunkle was transferred to California's men's colony in San Luis Obispo, and it was a medium security prison. Not long after arriving, Dunkle met 20-year-old prisoner Charles Rice. Rice, though younger, was a career criminal. He was aware that Dunkle was suspected of child murders, but he thought that Dunkle seemed nice enough. Never in my life.
Yeah. Like, well, maybe you killed kids. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he was like,
maybe he didn't do it.
I don't think he did it, but yeah.
I don't know.
Jeez.
The two began to talk about life and difficulties they'd faced in prison, and eventually they requested cell changes and became roommates.
You can do that?
I did not know that you could do that, but apparently you can do that.
Well, that just sounds like a sleepover, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Yeah.
Except, you know how like you go to a sleepover and you're like, hey, how about we had another night? Yay! And then by the next day, you're like, oh my God, I want to go home. I don't want to be around this person anymore. So,
Yep.
Dunkle told Rice stories of how he'd been in the mafia. He worked for the FBI, and Rice was like, yeah, right, dude, it's all BS. He just knew it. So eventually, during one talk, Dunkle told Rice that he'd seen the man who'd murdered Lance that day. Good God in heaven. Rice told him that story was ridiculous and that if he was on his jury, he would have been convicted. So then Dunkle admits that he'd murdered Lance. For the next 3 weeks, Dunkle told Rice everything about the murder with no emotion in his eyes. And not long after that, Dunkle told Rice a story that took place in July of 1985 in the Fair Oaks area near the bridge that connected it to Rancho Cordova. He said that while sitting at a picnic table, he saw a young boy ride by and knew that he was going to kill him. And it was Dannell.
But why?
I can't answer that question.
I just don't understand. It just
because there's no reason
fucking
for it.
Senseless. Yeah. Is a young kid.
Yeah.
Like,
and all he did was ride by on his bike.
Yeah. And he was like, yep, that's the one I'm going to kill. I mean, obviously he just wanted to kill somebody, but just,
yeah,
it just sucks.
Yeah, it sucks.
And I'm sorry that I have to use that language.
I wish you
I
wouldn't.
don't like to say words like that. That's the S word.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I get it. I mean, you're fired up. You're passionate. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dunkle rides off after him. He rams him with his bike and he knocks Sean to the ground. Sean was cooperative and Dunkle led him to the woods and he was like, look, I'm not going to hurt you. But even though he said he wasn't going to hurt him, Dunkle eventually stabbed Sean to death and left his body. He also admitted to murdering John Davies and burying his body and the knife he'd used to kill him. Rice considered murdering Dunkle himself. Instead, he made the decision to talk to police and he told them that they had to hear about the murders that his cellmate had confessed to.
Like, first of all, don't blame Rice.
Yeah.
Like, but with, I believe it was Sean, like, he stabbed him so many times. He stabbed him in the eyes. These are brutal, brutal murders. And he was friends with John Davies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know.
I mean, with Lance, he drained all of his blood.
I mean, what the fuck?
I know.
So
at this point, investigators are like, oh my gosh, we hit the jackpot. Thank God. And thanks to Rice, they could get Dunkle. He agreed to be wired and talk to Dunkle in the conference room. And Rice convinced Dunkle that he had a connection to the FBI who could make all of his problems go away. And Dunkle was like, fuck yes.
Doesn't that make this not admissible though?
To lie?
To say something like that?
I'm not sure.
I don't know, because that could be construed as if you confess, we'll hook
like a plea
you
deal
up.
Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Even, whether or not you did it, you just need to tell us what we want to hear so we can then get the ball rolling.
Right. And I mean, that's tricking him. And
Yeah.
I don't know. This was the 80s. I think
that's
anything
true,
went back then. I don't know. But Dunkle was like, yes, you guys can help me get rid of the evidence of the murders. So he was super eager to meet Rice's FBI friend. Dunkle drew maps of the murder scenes. He wrote papers describing the 3 murders in great detail with details that only the killer would know. Detectives took Rice and Dunkle out of the jail one day, traveled with Dunkle while he showed them specific areas where he'd murdered Sean and detailed where he'd stashed the murder weapons for all 3. He indicated where he'd buried John's remains, which were later recovered, and he admitted that he'd taken him out that night while John was still high on LSD, and he killed him. Then back at the prison in a recorded room, Dunkle confessed to the murders of Lance, Sean, and John in detail. He waived his right for an attorney. He answered every question. He smiled at Rice and the officers throughout, sometimes giggling, saying that he just wanted to help. After multiple assessments by different doctors, the judge ultimately declared Dunkle competent to stand trial. His murder trial began on October 16th, 1989. Closing arguments began on December 6th. Within 2 hours of the jury leaving to deliberate, they returned with a verdict, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder for Lance and John. In early January, Dunkle's sentence was determined death, and while he was on death row, Dunkle pled guilty to the murder of Sean. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, in case the death sentence was overturned for some reason. And Dunkle is still currently on death row in California. He has had several appeals filed on his behalf to appeal his death sentence, and the court questions whether he is mentally ill or not and legally can't execute someone who is mentally ill. So his series of appeals will likely last a very long time.
But at least he is not on the street.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And even if he does appeal the death sentence, he still has life in prison, so he will never be out.
Parole. Yeah. And that's where he needs to be, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let us know. Have you heard of this guy before?
Yeah.
Did you guys know about this case? Very interested to know.
Because I'm going to be honest with you, I sure didn't.
I didn't either, yeah.
Don't love him.
No, it's very sad.
It is incredibly sad. Ugh.
And now, I have another thing to add to my list of things to be afraid of. Everyone my kid is friends with.
I think you can get a feeling, though, about people sometimes.
I don't know. What if I don't? So, here's my feeling will be they're all serial killers.
Oh, yeah. See, that's
unless proven otherwise.
I don't need to go there. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, we love you guys.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next epi.
Bye.
Disgusting. It flew out of my mouth I was powerless to stop it.
Like the next time you call me, I'm just going to be like, ooh, I'm busy. Oops.
I don't blame you. I cannot believe I just said that. Guys, please forgive me. I know not what I do. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
There you go. Stick around for some shout outs though.
Yeah. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Connect with us on Instagram or Facebook to continue the conversation.
Thanks for listening, and we will meet you back here next week.
Bye.
The theme song for the show is created and composed by Stephen Toby. You can find more of Stephen's work on SoundCloud.
Our logo was created by Sloan Williams of Sophisticated Crayon. You can find more of her work on Etsy. Visit us at killerqueenspodcast.com for merch and other info about the show.